On May 20, 2025, at the state prison in Huntsville, Texas, Matthew Lee Johnson, 49, faced execution. He was convicted in a shocking case that rocked Garland, Texas, for a brutal attack on 76-year-old Nancy Harris by dousing her with a flammable liquid and setting her on fire in a Garland store. So what led Matthew Lee Johnson down an irreversible path of crime? Can any reason explain his unbelievable cruelty? Today we will explore his last meal, his final words before his life ended, and uncover the story behind this case. At the heart of this tragedy was Nancy Harris, a kind and diligent 76-year-old woman. At an age when she should have been enjoying her retirement, Nancy chose to work at a store in Garland, a suburb of Dallas. This wasn't just a means of livelihood, but also a way for her to stay active and engaged with life. Nancy was known in the community as a good-hearted woman who lived simply and had no enemies. Her life, though not luxurious, was full of peace and affection from those around her. On a fateful morning, May 20, 2012, that peace was brutally shattered. Nancy Harris was attacked right at her workplace. The act was unbelievably savage. The assailant doused her with a flammable liquid, specifically lighter fluid, and set her on fire. Despite suffering horrific burns and dying a few days later from severe injuries, Nancy Harris showed extraordinary resilience. Before taking her last breath, she managed to describe the suspect to the police, providing valuable clues that helped find the perpetrator. Her passing was a loss not only for her family, but also for the entire community, leaving an enduring nightmare of an inhumane crime. Matthew Lee Johnson, born on September 17, 1975, in Dallas County, Texas, USA, had a life marred by instability and challenges from a very young age. He grew up in an environment described as difficult and deprived, and signs of unstable and criminal behavior emerged early. Johnson's criminal history began at age 15 with car theft, the start of a long string of unlawful acts throughout his life. Matthew Lee Johnson had his own family with a wife and a daughter. However, these relationships seemed insufficient to pull him out of his criminal quagmire. He was consistently involved in legal troubles, and his criminal acts grew more severe over time. Could that challenging life be the main reason shaping Matthew Lee Johnson's criminal path? Or was it just a small part of a complex picture of a twisted personality? Why would a married man commit such a cruel act, setting an innocent woman on fire? On the morning of May 20, 2012, around 9:00 a.m., a horrifying event occurred at a store in Garland, a suburb of Dallas. Matthew Lee Johnson walked into the store where Nancy Harris was working. In an inexplicable act, Johnson approached Ms. Harris, an elderly woman unable to defend herself, and doused her with a flammable liquid, specifically lighter fluid. Then he coldly set her on fire. The flames quickly erupted, turning Ms. Harris into a living torch right inside her own store. Even more terrifying was Johnson's chilling calmness after the crime. He showed no fear or remorse. Instead, he casually took money from the cash register and snatched a ring from the victim's hand. Not only that, but he also took 2 packs of cigarettes, a lighter, and even a few packs of candy before fleeing the scene. He left Ms. Harris writhing in flames and extreme pain. His robbery and callousness after the crime further highlighted the brutality and incomprehensibility of the case. This horrific attack was partially captured by the store's security camera. Although the images were not entirely clear, they provided crucial evidence, partly depicting Matthew Lee Johnson's savagery and Nancy Harris's tragic final moments. What motivated Matthew Lee Johnson to commit such a heinous act? That question still haunts those who witnessed and followed the case. Immediately after receiving reports of the horrific attack, Garland police swiftly launched an investigation. The crime scene was heartbreaking, but Nancy Harris's descriptions, despite her critical condition, became the first valuable clues. She provided initial information about the attacker guiding the investigators. Authorities quickly collected footage from the store's security cameras and surrounding areas. Although not entirely clear, the footage captured parts of the perpetrator's actions, Matthew Lee Johnson, from the moment he entered the store until he left after committing the crime. These images, combined with the victims' and other witnesses' testimonies, helped police quickly narrow down and identify Johnson. With fairly clear evidence and timely information, police deployed forces to track down Johnson. The rapid and effective coordination of investigative units was key to solving the case. Just about an hour after the brutal attack, Matthew Lee Johnson was arrested by police while hiding in the nearby area. He was apprehended quite easily, with no significant signs of resistance. Did Matthew Lee Johnson ever think he could escape after committing such a heinous crime? The moment of his arrest not only ended his short escape, but also opened a new chapter in his confrontation with justice and the sentence for what he had done. The trial of Matthew Lee Johnson began in 2013 in Texas, attracting public attention. He was charged with capital murder, an exceptionally serious offense that can lead to the death penalty. At the trial, a shocking detail was that Johnson frankly admitted to setting Nancy Harris on fire. This confession, though it did not mitigate the crime, revealed a surprising aspect of his psychology. When facing the jury, Johnson attempted to express remorse. He called himself the filthiest person on earth as a way to show repentance or at least an awareness of his guilt. However, the prosecutor's arguments emphasized the horrific brutality of the murder, along with Johnson's long history of criminal offenses, indicating that he was an extremely dangerous threat to society. The prosecutor relentlessly highlighted the inhumanity in how he took the life of an elderly woman and his coldness in stealing property after the crime. Johnson's defense tried to cite mitigating circumstances, possibly issues from a difficult childhood psychological problems or a history of substance abuse. However, given the horrific nature of the crime and the suffering Ms. Harris endured, these arguments became weak. Ultimately, in 2013, the jury reached a verdict. They sentenced Matthew Lee Johnson to death. The sentence received high public approval, reflecting the deep outrage at his brutal actions. Did this death sentence truly bring justice to Nancy Harris and her family? While it cannot fully alleviate the pain of loss, this sentence was the law's affirmation of the price the perpetrator must pay. After many years of unsuccessful appeals, on May 20, 2025, Matthew Lee Johnson faced the final moments of his life at the state prison in Huntsville, Texas. At 49 years old, he was executed by lethal injection. He was the fourth person executed in 2025 in Texas, and the 18th inmate executed in the United States in the same year, indicating an increase in executions in the country. Before the injection process began, Matthew Lee Johnson was allowed a last meal and permitted to make a final statement. Although his meal was not publicly disclosed, some unofficial sources claimed he chose soup, cornbread, avocado smoothie, and pizza. He turned to Nancy Harris's family, who were present to witness this moment. "I never meant to hurt her," he said, a puzzling statement given the act that took her life. "I want to see Ms. Harris when I open my eyes and be with her forever." These words, though difficult for the victim's family to accept, were part of the condemned man's final moments. He also asked his wife and daughter for forgiveness for giving up and leaving an apology for what he had caused his own family. As the lethal injection began, Johnson gasped a few times and made snoring-like sounds before becoming completely still. He was pronounced dead at 6:53 a.m. CDT. Matthew Lee Johnson's death brought an end to a tragic and brutal case. Did this final moment truly bring closure and comfort to Nancy Harris's family, or will the pain of loss forever remain, regardless of the perpetrator's fate? The case of Matthew Lee Johnson is a tragic story that raises deep and unsettling questions about the nature of evil and the role of the justice system. What transformed a human being into such a brutal killer? From a difficult childhood and a long history of crime to the final brutal act, we see a chain of events leading to tragedy. Nancy Harris's family's pain is irreparable, and her passing is a heartbreaking testament to the cruelty of crime. The death penalty for Johnson, though controversial, reflected society's outrage and the desire to restore justice for the victim. However, it also makes us ponder the effectiveness and ethics of capital punishment. Does it truly serve as a deterrent, or is it merely a form of retribution? Johnson's final words, however seemingly remorseful, could not erase the guilt he had caused. This case is not just a criminal story, but also a lesson in social responsibility. It reminds us of the need to identify and address root problems such as unstable family environments, psychological issues, and social ills. Only then can we hope to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. What are your thoughts on Matthew Lee Johnson's fate and the lessons this story leaves us? How can we build a safer community where there is no room for such horrific crimes?